Hey, viewers and viewresses, my name is General Red Strategist and welcome back to Say Being Hunted. Time for another podcast style episode, but with just me this time, unfortunately. Not that, you guys are all going to be like, no Phil, no Connor, it's just Red and all that, this is going to be right boring, isn't it? No, I'm sure you're all thrilled that it's another Sir episode and all that. Maybe, I don't know. And again, you may not even be watching this video, and you may never know what I'm saying right now or what I'm about to say in this episode or anything like that. You may never discover. Who knows? What am I talking about? I don't know what this intro is and what it's actually becoming at the moment, but no, it's a Sunday afternoon as when I record, and I thought, I'd just sit down, have myself another recording session, record another podcast episode and all that. And actually, it's not just though that I'm planning on recording this afternoon. I'm also planning on doing some other stuff. Going to do some more Wolfenstein: The Old Blood, since I'm in Chapter 2 for that. By the time this video goes out, actually, I don't know if by the time this video goes out, my Wolfenstein Old Blood series will be at a point where I'm in Chapter 2 or not. I don't think maybe not. I don't know. But needless to say, I've recorded so many episodes of Wolfenstein: The Old Blood now that I'm already into Chapter 2. As of when I record this, basically. So you know what I'm trying to say. But no, there was actually something else that was on my mind this afternoon, and I thought it was just an interesting topic and would make for an interesting conversation. Well, an interesting one-sided conversation, that is, in a Surrey Being Hunted episode like this. And you know how slightly earlier this year, of course, I played Poppy Playtime Chapter 3. It got me thinking about mascot horror, because mascot horror seems to be a sort of subgenre that is kind of all the rage, I feel like, over the last sort of 10 years or so. And I think it really sort of kicked off, probably, most of all, I would say, with the first Five Nights at Freddy's game. Because the thing is, I think FNAF sort of set this whole trend off over the last decade or so. Because, of course, FNAF has a couple of interesting ingredients in it. It has the creepy setting, and then it has the visually distinct characters. You look at, even if you're not, like me, a FNAF player, even if you're not someone who's really played any of the FNAF games, and has not really that much interest in playing them, you have to admit, FNAF is one of those games that probably everyone has heard of. And probably everyone can name at least a few of the characters in it. I mean, I feel like everyone can probably name Freddy Fazbear, and they can probably name, a few of the others, like Chica and Foxy and, and other ones. But like some of the Security Breach characters as well. Everyone can probably fucking name What's-Her-Face, Roxanne Wolf, Because it's, like I say, creepy settings, visually distinct characters and all that. And so it kind of got me thinking about kind of the direction that mascot horror has gone and the ingredients that kind of make a good sort of mascot horror. And I think what's sort of interesting is that, a lot of the mascot horror games that we've seen have always kind of had very sort of, almost a kind of cartoony sort of vibe to them. Well, is that the right word? No, maybe not cartoony, but certainly very colourfully vibrant sometimes, vibe to them. Yeah, actually, no, cartoonish probably is a good way of describing it, but not cartoonish necessarily in terms of visuals. Just cartoonish perhaps in terms of certain aspects of the design, which are cartoonish but at the same time very macabre, kind of. So FNAF, of course, is the big example of that, with its sort of evil animatronic mascots. That's where the cartoonish but the macabre comes into it. But other mascot horror games that we've seen, since FNAF also kind of fit that mould as well. So Poppy Playtime being perhaps the other big example, set in a toy factory where it's all very it's like rusting up, but at the same time still quite childlike and colourful. And then of course all the actual monsters are them, they're obviously like toys, living toys, and they're still cartoonish but still macabre. So like Huggy Wuggy, Mommy Longlegs, and Catnap and Mr. Light, and the Smiling Critters, and all of the other ones as well. And then another example that we can also think of would be obviously the frigging the Garten of Banban games. There's about fucking 6 of those, which is insane. Those are such a cash grab, they are. But I mean, I've seen a few pictures and videos of those games. And yes, to reiterate for anyone who's about to ask, I have no intention of ever playing the Garten of Banban games, because personally I think they look a bit rubbish, just saying. But yeah, I mean, Garten of Banban has that same thing, you know, cartoony, but at the same time quite macabre looking monsters in a very sort of colourful, if creepy setting. And so I was just kind of thinking, you know, what would be next for sort of mascot horror? What will be the next sort of big mascot horror? What will it look like? What will its setting be? Things like this. Because the thing is, you look at all the settings, obviously they still sort of fit with that kind of, you know, comical, slightly cartoony sort of vibe. So obviously FNAF is set in the, you know, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza chain, and then you have Poppy Playtime set in an abandoned toy factory, and Garten of Banban, which is apparently set in a kindergarten, but if you watch the fucking videos, it's like there's a whole fucking facility underneath it, which is kind of ridiculous. But yeah, I thought it would be interesting to think about, you know, where would mascot horror go next? What territory would it try to cover in the next sort of big franchise that starts to become popular, that all the YouTubers start playing? And the thing is, like, I have seen screenshots of, there is technically another franchise, well, a game rather, I should say. In fact, actually, there's a couple of others I can think of as well, other examples. There was that Joyville one that I played a while back. If you want to see the video for that one, that's in my indie horror playlist. And that's, again, another sort of mascot horror. So, like, colourful cartoony. It's set in, I think, like a children's camp or play centre or whatever it is. That's closed down. And then there's obviously like the big sort of yellowish furry monster thing in that one. But there's another one which I haven't played, which again I'm sort of internally debating would I play it or not. I'm not sure. I think it's called Muzy, which is again sort of like I think it's like say in a children's play centre or something that's abandoned, and there's like this big sort of walking mouse/rat toy thing that presumably is trying to kill you. And it looks like basically it's sort of halfway between Poppy Playtime and Garten of Banban in terms of quality. It looks like basically it's slightly higher quality than Garten of Banban, but at the same time still looks kind of bare bones, and kind of like it's tending a bit towards very low budget. Hence why I've thought about maybe playing it, but at the same time, there's a part of me that's like, yeah, I'm not so sure. But yeah, you know, putting that aside, essentially it's the same thing: mascot horror, cartoonish, macabre monsters, and slightly comical settings, cartoonish settings, and all that. So it got me thinking, you know, what sort of ground could mascot horror cover next? What kind of settings could you go with? And there's definitely some examples I can think of that probably would lend themselves to good sort of mascot horror settings. So one example that I was thinking of, you know, we've had obviously a toy factory in Poppy Playtime. So where else could you go that would be still sort of like have that kind of childlike cartoonish vibe, kind of? I was thinking the other day, because yesterday me and Phil and Connor did the recording for the previous episode, and of course we were talking about junk food in that one, favourite junk foods and all that, and you know, Phil was mentioning licorice, and we mentioned obviously Bertie Bassett, you know, and that got me thinking, has there ever been a mascot horror game set in like an abandoned candy factory, something like that? There may well have been, you never know, but I feel like I've never seen an example of that. I mean, some people probably were thinking, what about like a circus setting with like clowns and things like that? But having said that, like clowns and circus settings, I'm pretty sure have been done in various, you know, horror games before. I mean, a big example I can think of is one of the chapters of a horror game called Dark Deception, which I'm pretty sure has like a circus clown themed chapter in it. And that actually is another game that probably does fit the mould of mascot horror a bit. Because if you don't know what Dark Deception is an episodic series of games, horror games, which are basically based on Pac-Man. It's the same mechanic, except first person. You play as a character and you go through these environments and you have to pick up all these objects before the monsters get you. And each chapter has sort of like unique monsters, and some of them are quite cartoony, but still quite macabre. So I think it's like chapter 1 in that one, you're in like a weird hotel, and there's these like monkey bellhop things that are trying to kill you. There's like the second chapter, you're in like a school, there's like a zombie girl who's trying to get you. Things like this. I'm pretty sure there's like another chapter in that where you're in a sewer and there's all like these horrible demonic rubber duck things that are trying to get you, things like that. So yeah, Dark Deception actually is another example. And like I say, I'm pretty sure they've had a chapter in that one, which is clowns and circuses, that kind of thing. So yeah, I was thinking maybe like a candy factory would probably be a good one. You had like some horrible, like Bertie Bassett looking monstrosity, mascot monstrosity that's trying to kill you, something like that. So that would be one. Other ones I was thinking, you know, I obviously played that, what was it called? That Kitty Kart 64 indie horror game pretty recently on the channel. I always thought actually that's a concept I had before I actually played that game. Idea like a haunted game that's a kart racer, because that's another one that would lend itself to a mascot horror, you know? You have sort of like a horror kart racer. Again, you could have those cartoony vibes and visuals, and very sort of cartoonish, distinct characters, things like that, would probably lend itself to that very easily. So that was another concept that I think would work for a mascot horror. Another one I actually thought was, again, something cartoonish, something a bit maybe childlike, that plays on that whole sort of things in your childhood suddenly made into macabre and horrifying stuff. Maybe something like a water park, or a zoo, perhaps, or an aquarium, a zoo/aquarium. I think those would also probably lend themselves quite well. A water park, I think, would be an interesting one. And that's, I mean, partly that's just me because, you know, I like pool rooms games, and I do sort of like the vibe of water parks with all like their crazy, colourful slides and pools and things like that, and lazy rivers and whatever else have you. So that would be an interesting one. You have like an abandoned water park or something with robot animatronic mascots. Or a zoo. A zoo actually would be an interesting one because in that one you could sort of have like a mix of like feral animals crossed with sort of animatronic robots, things like that. Oh my god, could you imagine that? A zoo where they were doing horrible science experiments on the animals. Oh my god, it would be like fucking the island of Dr. Morrow or something, come to think of it, wouldn't it? If you don't know what the island of Dr. Morrow is, that's a freaking reference. That's a literary reference, that is. It's the island of Dr. Morrow was a H.G. Wells novel. I think it was written in the late 19th century, sort of like 1890s, somewhere around there. It's about a guy who basically survives a shipwrecking, washes up on an island where there's like a scientist, Dr. Morrow, who's been doing experiments on wild animals, and he's been like fusing them with people to make sort of like weird animal people. I've never actually read the book. Maybe I should buy it sometime and actually read it. But yeah, God, that'd be an interesting idea to do a zoo, wouldn't it? Come to think of it. I think that would be very curious. But you know, I also had sort of other thoughts as well. Less to do with settings and more to do with general premises in terms of what would be an interesting premise for a mascot horror game. And I was thinking actually some more sort of like British themed, or not British themed, but sort of like ones inspired by perhaps bits of British sort of, not popular culture, but things like British literary culture. So for example, if you look at some children's literature in the UK, one thought I had was maybe like a theme park, but specifically a theme park modelled after sort of like a demonic Thomas the Tank Engine, something like that. Because, you know, Thomas the Tank Engine, of course, is a massive children's literary franchise that originated in the UK. You know, Reverend Audrey, whatever he was called, who originally wrote the books. The Island of Sodor, with all like the little, you know, steam locomotive characters. You could totally do a fucking mascot horror that's sort of like a piss take of Thomas the Tank Engine, right? With sort of like, say, like a theme park where they have animatronic steam engines, things like that. Steam engine characters or whatever. That would be an interesting one. The other thought I had, again, sort of like a theme park, or maybe like a haunted video game. So, with like animal characters, a la, say, like Watership Down or the Redwall books. That probably would lend itself, perhaps, to a mascot horror as well. I also just actually had another Mascot horror idea. What about one set in a museum with like mannequin style characters, things like that? So there's plenty of ideas for where you could potentially go with a Mascot horror, ladies and gentlemen. So yeah, if you're an aspiring indie game dev and you were looking for some ideas, there's some possible suggestions right there, ladies and gentlemen. Drink up my tea whilst I'm at it. Yeah, feel free to maybe, adapt some of those ideas if you want. But give me credit. Give me credit in your credit sequence. I'm the one who came up with the original concept. It's mine. Nah. But yeah, Mascot horror. One of those things which, it is becoming, starting to show signs of saturation at this point. But I still think there's ground that whole subgenre could potentially cover, as evidenced by some of the things that I've just discussed here, ladies and gentlemen. Right, well, I think that's probably it, really, for the topic of conversation that I had for this episode. So, let me know in the comments any of those ideas that I've just aired there, which you think would be interesting. Anything there that makes you think, oh, I'd love to see a Mascot horror game using that premise that you just outlined there, Red. Any that jump out at you, any that leap out and you think, oh yeah, I'd want to see that, just let me know down in the comments below and all that. But in the meantime, I'll start to wrap up here, folks. So Facebook and Twitter links are down below, along with a link to my propagandist channel for anyone interested. And if you enjoyed, a like is of course always appreciated. As I've mentioned, there are certain Mascot horror games I've played here on the channel: FNAF Security Breach and the Ruin DLC, Poppy Playtime Chapters 1 through 3, Joyville. If you want to go and watch them, just search on the YouTube search bar General Red Strategist and name of that game, and you'll find it, no doubt. Other than that, I'm going to sign off now. Goodbye, everybody. Safer. Keep moving around, lay down some fire. Oh, good for us there. Ladies and gentlemen. Right, do that there. Wow. Keep using that missile. Good. Shoot, 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 shoot.